thou shalt not do this. And just sit there and preach to us every Sunday morning. And I lost a taste for Christ then. Because if this is Jesus, I don't want it. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I was a altar boy. I did what was expected every Sunday morning, and stand up there before the priest and wash the priest's hands and have him give out the Eucharist and the blood and the wine and do all that thing that was supposed to be done, and that was it. Thought I had it all figured out. Then get on the Navy, seen that happen, said no, didn't want anything to do with it. So I lived apart from Christ for about 15 years after that, until I came here to the state of Georgia and met the second man in my life. That man's name was David Barrett. I was working at a community service board here in Swainsboro, Georgia. He was my supervisor. And he was a great Christian man. He was a Baptist deacon in his church. And he had devotion every Monday morning in the workplace. 7:15, not mandatory, but mandatory. Show up, or don't show up, but show up anyways. That's how he put it. And so we had devotion every Sunday morning, and he would read the Bible, and he would expositional teach it. It wasn't just read it. He says, let me explain it to you. Let me break it down to you. And he did that for 5 years. And then one day, David got called into his supervisor's office, and that supervisor called him in and cussed him out, talked badly about him, demeaned him, and the whole time my boss said to him, he says, yes sir, no sir, understand, never lost his cool. And when David came out of that man's office and came down to his office, I asked him, said, Mr. Barrett, I said, how were you able to take all those accusations? How were you able to take all that was against you and not get upset? Now I'm still a good bit of sailor still left in me. And he says, because Jesus Christ is my peace, and no man can take my peace. I said, David, show me that Jesus. I need to live that Jesus. Because for 20 years, all I knew was the wrong Jesus, the Jesus of what the Catholic Church taught, the Jesus of what false, hypocritical Christians taught. And when I seen it in his life where he was able to live it out in the hardship of times and see that Jesus, I said, I need to see that Jesus. And he began ministering to me, he began discipling me, and one day, about 3 years later, he led me to Jesus Christ right there in the workplace. And I said the sinner's prayer. I don't believe in a special prayer. But I said, Lord, I commit my sins unto you. I know I cannot forgive myself. You have to pay for them. I give them all to you. I surrender all my sins right now to you. And then I knew I was then a brand new creature in Christ. I was no longer the sailor, the foul-mouthed man. I was no longer the sailor who was an alcoholic. I was no longer a sailor who was a wife beater. I was no longer a sailor who was a prolific adulteress who was hooked on pornography for over 20 years. When I gave my life to Christ, he took every bit of that away from me. I no longer desired any of it. Did I struggle with it from time to time? Yes, but I gave God the strength. Every day would give me ability to look to see when those things happen, because you know we're on the internet all day long. I'm a computer IT guy for over 35 years. I'm on the internet. You're going to see racy stuff. And I asked God to give me the vision in my eyes not to desire to see those things. And what he told me, and God said to me, he says, this is what you need to see. Every picture you see there is somebody's wife, or somebody's daughter, or somebody's sister. If you look at that way, you will not lust the way you used to lust. And that's what helped me from every time I have those temptations. Even if it's to walk down the street, you see a beautiful woman walking down the street, the first thing God puts in my mind, that's someone's wife, or someone's mother, or someone's sister. I shouldn't look at her that way. And that's what changed me. So the first man, my commanding officer, don't be him. I desire for everybody to be like a David Barrett, who's willing to take the trials of life, willing to take the difficulties of life, willing to see the things that God lays before you and not let it break you, but let it mold you and shape you into the man that you need to be. And that's what made me want to be a Christian, because I seen it in someone's life. Men, we're supposed to show God in our life. We're not supposed to be reflecting our own light. We're supposed to reflect the light of Jesus Christ to everyone that we meet, everyone we see. And that's what David Barrett did. Even when 2 years later, later, when he got the word that his 19-year-old daughter, who was unmarried, became pregnant. Here's a man devoted to Christ, deacon in his church, and watched him weep and wail in his office when his daughter called him and says, I'm pregnant. And she was not married. And I said, how are you going to handle it, sir? He says, she's my daughter. That's my grandchild. I'll love them both. And that's what he did. Did not condemn her for making a mistake. Just lifted her up and said, let's move forward. What do we too often do in the church? When someone makes a mistake, the first thing we want to do is squash them like a bug underneath our shoe. But here was a man who was devoted in Christ, who had everything to lose, but was willing to stand to make what was wrong right. And that's what we should all do. So that's my testimony about who I was before I came here. I mean, none of you knew me when I was that person. No one here, not even Tim, knew me before I knew Christ. Because when me and Tim started talking and me and his wife started doing things, we were Christians then. I remember when Tim was at Eastwood Church of God, and I went to a Valentine's dinner with him and his wife and me and my wife, and we were just getting into the church that time. I just got saved probably a year after that time. And I remember I loved Tim for this, because one year at Christmas, his wife sent around a little flyer that says, what should I be? And in there she says, she put in hers, a pastor's wife. 2 years later, Tim becomes a pastor. And I remember that. So it's such a sweet memory there. So I think Mike's got a song for us real quick, and then I'm going to open us up in prayer, and then we will go into the message. But I wanted to give you a testimony first so that you understand that who stands before you is just as broken as anyone in this room. No one has any more brokenness than anybody else, because God is the great repairman, and God can fix anything that has been broken.